Tsunekatsu Ishihara, the CEO of the Pokémon Company, believes the series can last for another 50, maybe even 100 years at least. And by the time that happens, we'll have seen a great number of nations in the world adapted into new Pokémon regions. And maybe Game Freak can draw some inspiration for that from the surprisingly high number of Pokémon who appear to hail from regions we have yet to see. Cause yeah, as the Pokédex teaches us, just because you were introduced in, say, Gen 3, doesn't mean you're natively a Hoenn Pokémon. And that is not an example I'm making up out of thin air, by the way. That is literally the situation for Corphish. Even though it can natively be found in Hoenn on routes 102 and 117, the Pokédex has mentioned ever since Pokémon Ruby that it is actually a foreign Pokémon, brought to Hoenn as a pet originally. Fire Red and Leaf Green then again mention it came from overseas, which makes sense. This is another Japan-based region, so if they're foreign to Hoenn, they're also foreign to Kanto, you would presume, and Oraz then doubles down by again calling them foreign. But it's not just Poke Japan Corphish is foreign to. Its dex entries in Ultra Sun, Shield and Scarlet also refer to it as coming from overseas, and then settling in their respective region. So Corphish is also not from Alola, it's not from Galar, and while it could technically still be from Paldea, as Corphish is only in the Kitakami dex, meaning that coming from overseas again refers to Japan, the fact that it isn't in the Paldea dex is a strong indication in and of itself. Same applies to Unova, it's not found in the wild there. That leaves Kalos, so Poke France, as the only option, but I don't think it's likely. Shield's dex entry says Corphish comes from afar, which I don't think is a term you would use for a Pokemon that hails from a relatively close by nation like France is compared to the UK. It's more likely the origin of Corphish is Poke Mexico, as it is based on a red swamp crayfish who originally hail from Mexico but have since spread as an invasive species just like Corphish. It would also explain why Unova doesn't call it an overseas Pokemon. Over there, it's not overseas. Now, you may be thinking, sure, you may think it's from Poke Mexico, but when we ever get that region, Game Freak will probably not make it canon anyway. And to that I say, well, you may prove to be correct, I don't have future sight, but there is actually a precedent for Pokemon that originally hailed from a mystery region to have that later become clarified in the future. A very good example is Exeggutor. In Ruby and Sapphire, it is mentioned this Pokemon originally came from the tropics, which was not really a climate that existed in the Pokemon world at the time. Hoenn is kind of tropical-esque, but definitely not enough to qualify. But then, all those years later, when an actual tropical location was introduced, Alola, lo and behold, a Alolan Exeggutor is introduced, complete with dex entries that specify this is the peak environment for Exeggutor to thrive. Basically confirming that while it is considered a Kanto Pokemon, it actually hails from Alola originally, turning the unknown home region into a known one. But don't take this to mean Alola always is the tropical answer. Ever since its introduction, Gible has been stated to not originally hail from Sinnoh, with Pearl's dex entry mentioning it once lived in the tropics. It's why Gible lives in caves, by the way, because those are warmer than Sinnoh's native cold climate. Anyway, you'd think this would be another easy one too, with the Alola games getting the chance to confirm Gible is actually from Alola too, but that didn't happen. According to Ultramoon, Gible natively hails from a region that is much hotter than Alola, leaving its region of origin a mystery still. Seeing as Gible is a mix between a dragon and a land shark, both of which don't actually exist, it becomes a lot harder to theorize where Gible could actually be from, with several options still possible ranging from South America to other islands like Costa Rica and the Maldives, as well as Southeast Asia, which is likely the setting for Pokemon Winds and Waves. Maybe those will finally give us an answer. Speaking of Alola though, this region too introduced several new Pokemon that are not natively from there, including actual Alolan forms Alolan Rattata and Raticate. Although, think about the situation for more than a second and you'll probably come to the conclusion that what is meant here is that while Rattata and Raticate aren't natively found in Alola, they were imported from what is probably a Japanese region, so Kanto or Johto, not an unknown region. And while in Alola, they eventually became Alolan Rattata and Raticate, due to the behavior of their rival Yungoos. And Yungoos is actually not from Alola either. They too were imported from another region, and this one definitely is unknown. While Yungoos and Gumshoos are found in the wild in Paldea, the idea is probably not for these Pokemon to come from there originally. They are based on mongooses, which in real life were imported to Hawaii to help with a rat problem, just like the Pokemon variant. And they hail from India, which means Poke India is probably also the region of origin for Yungoos. And it's not just Yungoos either. I would imagine most of you know this, but Copperajah also hails from an unknown region, which is mentioned in both its dex entries for Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. Considering the strong historical connection between the UK and India, as well as the fact Copperajah is based on an Indian elephant, it seems extremely likely that Copperajah is natively from Poké India too. Further evidence is found in Legends Arceus, where Raichu's dex entry is altered to substitute the Indian elephant reference found in Fire Red to Copperajah. Professor Laventon also says Copperajah hails from his homeland, which would make the connection to India even more likely. Let's stick with Sword and Shield for the next Pokemon from an unknown region, none other than Ice-Coo. According to Sword and Violet's dex entry, it literally drifted into Galar and Paldea from colder regions of the world, which probably does not mean the Crown Tundra, even though that is also a winter wonderland. Seeing as Ice-Coo is quite obviously a penguin, it most likely natively hails from Poké Antarctica, which is a region I don't think we will see in a Pokemon game anytime soon. Maybe some sort of spin-off one day, but I don't think Antarctica will ever be a mainline region. From one bird-based Pokemon to another, Quaxly. Starters are in general a weird category for something like this. They're rarely ever found in the wild, and if they are, it's in hyper-specific conditions, so like Hisui or the Blueberry Academy's terrarium. But this is often not translated to not being native to a region, but rather than being incredibly rare. The existence of Turtwig, Chimchar and Piplup in Legends Arceus only strengthens that idea. The sole exception to the rule appears to be Quaxly, as Scarlet's dex entry mentions it migrated to Paldea from distant lands long ago. While I found myself quite confident in naming the origins of Corphish, Copperajah and Ice-Coo, I feel less certain about Quaxly's origin. It appears to be based specifically on a crested duck, which is indeed not native to Spain, so that checks out. Crested ducks natively hail from South America, particularly Chile and Argentina, so that could be the answer. However, ducks like this do live in Spain nowadays and were brought over from Indonesia, where they were bred, so it could also be that the often speculated setting for Winds and Waves is actually Quaxly's intended home. And then there is also the very prominent carnival aspect introduced when it evolves, which could indicate it hails from Brazil. So yeah, a lot of options there, and seeing as starters are basically never found in the wild, we might not ever get an answer. And speaking of a Pokemon of unknown origins that will probably never get a canon home, Meltan and Melmetal. I would be shocked if Game Freak doesn't regret how they have handled Meltan and Melmetal's home region. While they are considered Gen 7 Pokemon, every source that separates Pokemon by home region always includes an unknown region, specifically for Meltan and Melmetal, because they hail from Pokemon Go and not an actual mainline game. As such, the idea is probably that these two are from a real world, weird as that sounds, not from an in-universe location on the Pokemon world. But even then, the distinction made solely for these two is bizarre. There are plenty of Pokemon not from the region they were first introduced in. Just look at the Pokemon in this video, and there are even some I won't tackle, yet are clearly not from their supposed home region, like the Paradox Pokemon and Ultra Beasts. Those literally are not from Paldea and Alola, yet they are listed as coming from there, while Meltan and Melmetal have unknown origins. Making things even more confusing is the fact that G-Max Melmetal has clear ties to Galar, meaning that while Game Freak appears to like the idea that these two are canonically from our real world, they still have clear origins and presence in the Pokemon world. By that logic, why are, in universe, Meltan and Melmetal not considered Galar Pokemon? It makes absolutely no sense, and I can guarantee you that eventually Meltan and Melmetal will quietly be called Alola Pokemon. It's just not worth keeping up this charade for, how long were they aiming for? 50, 100 years? And while other legendaries and mythicals don't have a situation this weird, there are plenty more whose origins are a mystery. Kapfu is one of my favorites. It and Urshifu hail from a mountainous region far away from Galar, but it was specifically mentioned in its profile when it was revealed that both are actually more common in their home region. It's a fun idea, I think, that one day a future region will have these legendary Pokemon walking around as if they're regular Pokemon because they're simply more common here. As for what region that may be, I would suspect it to be Poké China. Their martial arts style is specifically Chinese, it's called Wushu, and the animals they're based on are Asian bears, which are found in the entire continent, China included. And maybe when that region comes, it will also be revealed to be the home of the Treasures of Ruin, which are said to hail from a distant land east from Paldea and were brought to the region by merchants. This leaves a lot of options, but their names not so much. Tinglu, Woshen, Shiyu, Shenpao, those are all pretty obviously Chinese names. Design-wise, the Chinese inspiration is not as obvious, but the entire idea of the Treasures of Ruin comes from the story of the four perils from Chinese mythology. The most recent mythical is also still shrouded in mystery, at least when it comes to its origin. Pechuran's backstory explains that both it, Okidogi, and its human caretakers were from a distant land compared to Kitakami. On the way from their homeland to Kitakami, they also picked up Vezendipity and Monkey Dory in another region entirely, one that is in between their home and Kitakami. In a similar vein, Ogerpan and its human companion also hail from a land distant from Kitakami. According to Yukito, who is Kirin and Carmine's grandfather, it was a land that also had Terra crystals, which does of course put the suspicion heavily on Paldea, even if Ogerpan doesn't feel particularly Spanish and is instead heavily based on Japanese cultural elements. Then again, the same applies to the Loyal Free and Pechurant, they are based on Japanese folktales, yet apparently in-universe don't hail from Poke Japan, although I guess Vezendipity and Monkey Dory could technically be from other Japan-based Pokemon regions. Peaches, as in the fruit that Pechurant is clearly based on, are from China though, so that is the most logical region of origin for it. Seems like Game Freak has a lot of Pokemon to tie in if we ever get a Chinese-based region. And finally, we go from the most recent mythical Pokemon to the very first, Mew. In the early days of the series, Mew was said to be discovered by researchers in Guyana, which is a real-life country in South America. The continent itself was also mentioned in Dex entries from Pokemon Stadium and Fire Red, but obviously hasn't made an appearance since, with Pokemon stepping away from mentioning things from the real world. Since then, Mew's origin hasn't really been made clear or been mentioned much, the current reading being that it was discovered in the jungle, vague as that is. But since Kanto obviously doesn't have jungles, it has to hail from another region and yeah, I think it's quite obvious where Mew is actually from. It may no longer be called Guyana or even South America in the Pokemon world, but that has to be where Mew was first discovered still. It's the only thing that makes sense. And with that, we have pretty much all of them covered. Do you have any theories of your own as to where these Pokemon may originally be from? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, subscribing. If you're also interested in either the Mario or Fire Emblem series, you may want to check out my other channels, Yantapedia and Nagapedia. Links are in the description. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.